All right, I would like to welcome everyone this afternoon to session number 345. And the session is about thriving through connection, the importance of nurturing mental health during the thyroid cancer journey. And today's speaker is Laura Slagle. And Laura is the founder and CEO and clinical director of Olive Leaf Family Therapy in Fresno, California. Laura has a staff of 12 therapists, some of them with specialties in working with individuals with chronic health problems and or disabilities. With over 3 decades of experience working with adults, couples, children, and families as an educator, administrator, advocate, case manager, and mental health professional, Laura connects with her patients from a place of understanding and compassion and believes that love really is enough, not to cure all hardships, but to endure all we come across in our life journeys. Laura's ultimate goal is to reach her community and beyond with a message of hope, love, healing, and healthy relationships. Laura is also a thyroid cancer survivor herself. After her diagnosis and thyroidectomy in the fall of 2011, she underwent radioactive iodine treatment in the winter of 2012. Thankfully, she has had no reoccurrence since then, and we're certainly happy to hear that. So with no further words from me, I would like to go ahead and welcome Laura to come on in, and we'll all be very anxious to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. This is my first webinar where I don't have interaction with people. So this is different for me. I feel like it's always good to just put it out there. If there's something that's new or nerve-wracking, or even though it doesn't fix it, it's good to say, what's going on for you. That's kind of part of my training. So I encourage other people to do that. So I like to do it myself too. And this is, it's nice I can see Becky's face anyway. It's nice to see somebody, but it's different for me to be talking with people without having them there to interact with. So what I've done with my presentation is I've put in a few questions here or there, which are, just kind of questions for you to reflect, and maybe they may be questions just for you to consider yourself. But you can also, if you feel comfortable, put a little response in the chat. We won't, talk with each person, obviously, but just hearing some of the responses. If I ask, can you relate to what I was talking about? Maybe a few people might type in some responses and Becky can read them to us. So I was asked to talk about the importance of mental health in our thyroid cancer journey. And I know that mental health is really becoming destigmatized, or, more normalized. Mental health treatment, mental health, just talking about mental health in general. It's good that it's becoming more acceptable in our society. So I think, that's one of the reasons we're focusing on this. I know when I went through my thyroid cancer diagnosis and treatment, I don't think it was really even brought up. So I'm glad that this is coming up now. And I was thinking about how I can address that. And my first thought was through connection. So when I say that, it's my connection with you, our connection with each other, our connection with our families. The connection in our community is very important. And I think in our culture, especially the American culture, we're taught to value independence and to be able to handle things and be strong and handle things on our own. And although I see that value, I don't believe that we're designed that way. So we are, as humans, we naturally gravitate to connection, whether we're an introvert or an extrovert. That doesn't mean, we like people or we don't people. It just has to do with where we refuel. So while an introvert may refuel by being with a few loved ones, and an extrovert may refuel by being around lots of friends and many people, we all need people. We need each other. And I think that's an important thing to remember. It's important to our mental health. So one thing we do in connecting with each other as thyroid cancer survivors is that we tell our story. You may have had that experience, and we connect through, like I mentioned, through relationship with each other. We connect with ourselves and our needs. We connect with our emotions, all of them. I'll be saying a little more later about how all emotions are important. We think that we want to be happy and have all those joyful emotions, and we sometimes see sadness or anger as bad emotions. I don't see them as good or bad. I see them all having different purposes. So we'll touch on that a little later. And then connecting with others. So connecting with ourselves, with our emotions, and with others is what I'm going to focus on. So if that's my idea of what mental health is, being mentally healthy is focusing on relationship, connection, and having balance, connecting with ourselves, our emotions, and with others. What does mental health mean to you? This is an opportunity if you want to throw something in the little chat, if there are any little, just what comes to the top of your mind with that, if there's anything anyone wants to add. And then we can kind of have, if some of those answers come in, feel free to interrupt me, Becky, and go ahead with those.
Probably got a quiet group today.
That's okay. Sometimes, especially at the beginning, that's all right. I just
we got an answer there, and they're saying balance, and I would have to agree with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things I mentioned a minute ago is telling our story to each other. Having balance in our lives is important. That balance can be balance between, like we talked about, independence and connection with others. There's lots of areas in our life where balance is important. Do we have one more?
That also says balanced.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool. Being mentally healthy, people are seeing it as being balanced. Awesome. I want to share my story with you because part of our beginning to connect is sharing our stories. You may have been in, I don't know, I know that I've been in thyroid cancer support groups, and it seems like the number one thing we all want to do is share our stories, see the similarities, the differences. I was in 2010, I was at actually a gynecology appointment, and my gynecologist noticed nodules in my neck. I had never even noticed her checking that before. It wasn't something I was aware of. She brought my attention to it and said, hey, let me send you for some blood tests, and then you need to see your primary doctor. I went to my primary care doctor, and I'll say, when I share my story, and maybe when you're sharing your story with others, it's good to share kind of the facts of the story, but it's also good to share just your thoughts and your feelings that were happening through your story. So I'll share with you that when those nodules were found, it was a little alarming because I was like, what? I didn't know about them. I didn't know what they were, but I wasn't too concerned yet. I was just a little confused. So then I went to my primary care doctor. I had actually been to him not that long ago, And I had mentioned being extremely tired. Even, I don't know if I mentioned to him feeling a little depressed, but if I'm honest, I was feeling a bit depressed at the time, and which is unusual for me. Some people struggle with that on and off throughout life. But for me, that was unusual. And so I was I was working full time, and I was going to school full time, actually in my master's program to become a therapist. And my doctor had just said to me, you know what, you're working full time, you're going to school full time. Of course, you're going to be tired. And so nothing more, was done about that until I had this blood test. And he said, wait a minute, of course you're tired. Your thyroid is not even really doing anything for you right now. And you are, he said, I'm surprised you can even drag yourself in my office with how it's functioning. So that was kind of shocking. And he said, no big deal though, there are two different things going on. There's the thyroid function, and then there's these nodules. We have to have them checked out. They're probably nothing concerning. And so he sent me to an endocrine surgeon to look at that further. I believe he sent me to do an ultrasound at that time. I went to the endocrine surgeon. She looked at my ultrasound and said, yes, I'm looking at these nodules. They are hypoechoic, so they're probably not a concern. There was one bigger than the others, which gave concern, because she said, that was a little bit of a concern. And I don't even remember, I still wasn't that upset about it. So I don't even remember why, but she did recommend having my thyroid removed. She said that, these can eventually become cancers or can cause you other problems. So I do recommend removing them, and explained that it would be pretty simple. They would go off to pathology after that. I said, is there, I was becoming a little alarmed, and I said, is there any problem with putting it off till I have a school break? And, I was busy at the time. And I'm going to mention that later, how important it is to have balance, like the people in the chat were saying, and to be balancing your life, paying attention to your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, other facets of your well-being. But I was just busy, moving fast forward. And I thought, I don't have time for this. So is it something I can put off? And she said, oh yeah, this is, it can be an elective surgery. Do it when you have time in your schedule. So I put it off till my school break and at the end of December. And she said, now let's see, I believe I have the date on here. Yeah, I had a thyroidectomy right before Christmas, December 21st. And she said, I'll be out of town visiting family. So if you'll hear from my office in a few days, they'll just tell you the pathology report was negative, no cancer or anything. She did mention thyroid cancer, like it can happen, but she was quite sure it wouldn't. And my office will just give you the results. No problem. She said, on the rare chance that the results are not as favorable, they would check with me first and ask if they can give you the results. So she said, if you haven't heard from me by a certain date, I don't know, give me a call, give the office a call. So I didn't hear from them by that date. That's when my anxiety kicked in, and I started to get worried, because she said they would just routinely call me. So I called the office. They said, we'll call you back. We just need to check with the doctor to make sure that, she released your results. And then I received a call back from the doctor herself. I knew she was on vacation, visiting family, And that's when I knew, just hearing her voice on the phone, that I had thyroid cancer. I was, quite sure that was why. And sure enough, she called. Wonderful doctor, was very reassuring. And I thought it was actually very nice that she called herself. I was at that point probably kind of in shock and not able to hear everything she was saying, which is another reason for the importance of connection, having family members, friends, somebody close to you with you when you're hearing important information. I believe I had my husband nearby. And so she was telling me about my diagnosis and kind of reassuring me that usually it's very treatable, all of that. So we went through that. She did tell me about the radioactive iodine treatment. I began the process of, that was the treatment she recommended. I began the process of getting ready for that. And there was a day, this is really the reason I want to share my story with you today, because there was a day I'll never forget. I was working at an organization where we had a very close team. We all became close friends. And on January 17th, 2011, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we all had the day off. But my close friend in my team, my work team, contacted the whole work team and said, I had told them, I was going to be out because I was going to do this radioactive iodine and I would need to be, not eating anything with iodine for a certain amount of time. And then I would be in isolation for a certain amount of time. And so she gathered our whole work team and got them together, brought them to my house. She had recipes, all recipes without using any iodized salt. She had recipes all set out. And as people came to my house on their day off, on their day off from work, they all came to my house one by one when they could. She would hand them a recipe, say, here are the ingredients, you put all of this in this container. And she facilitated, and all of my work team participated in making food for me for while I was in treatment and while I was isolated and couldn't, be out in the kitchen around my family. That's a day I will never forget, because I was just blown away by someone caring that much and thinking of something so hands-on to do that would help so much. During I had the radioactive iodine treatment in February. So she had them make all these meals, put them in my freezer. So they were all there. While I had the treatment, my husband was able to pull something out of the freezer, cook it, and then leave it outside my door because I was in isolation. And I will tell you, being an extrovert, being in that isolation was probably the hardest part. And having those meals, it's, might seem like a little thing, but having those meals made for me, and I pulled each one out. Sometimes there was a little note in there from my coworkers. I pulled each one out and ate it. And I could literally, it sounds strange, but I could literally feel the love in each bite of that food. So that was powerful to me. They also sent me a basket of, little items and things during that time. But so if you are a family member or a friend of somebody with a diagnosis, little acts like that, sometimes you feel like, as a family or friend, you feel like, what can I do? There's nothing I can do to help. And just little things like that can really help. So that was meaningful to me. So I'm wondering, is there anything that resonated with you from my story? How is your story the same or different? If you, would like to pop something in the chat, feel free to do that. It may take you a minute. I can continue on. The next few slides I'm going to talk about are a little more informational. And so, you can also still be putting some information in that chat on how reflecting on your story, how it might be the same, how it might be different. Maybe you had something special happen for you. Maybe, maybe it caused you to think of something. Maybe you had different emotions when you were going through your process of being diagnosed. So how does thyroid cancer affect our mental health? What are the obstacles? Some of the obstacles there, this could be like a 3-hour workshop easily, but some of the obstacles I thought of to comment on are that, like I said, I was kind of in shock. You may not be prepared for the emotional distress that it creates, just hearing that you have a cancer diagnosis. It can be shocking and traumatizing for your family as well. And then families may be distressed and reacting, and sometimes, even though we're the one going through it, we feel like we have to take care of our family members. And so we might feel like, oh, I can't mention how scared I am. I need to tell my mother or my sister that, oh, it's all going to be okay. And that can be difficult, because then that doesn't give you the opportunity to express those feelings. So my suggestion is that, you do find a time to support each other, and that both the individual and the friends or family are able to express what they are feeling. But it can be hard. It can be hard to not feel like you have to take care of the other person. Some people may minimize, like, oh, I heard that's not so bad, or we've all heard that's the best cancer to get. And no cancer is the best cancer to get, sorry. And other people may catastrophize, like, oh my gosh, you're going to die. And so finding the balance of being able to share with people, knowing who is healthy for you to share with, knowing who is a person that's very reactive, and maybe you need to limit your time with that person. You may feel isolated and alone, especially if you don't know anyone else who has experienced this. That's why for me, both an online support group, we didn't have as much of the tech, and there was technology, but not as much as you have now. And so it was more of a list serve, I want to say. And but that online support group was so helpful. There were people in there that had gone before me and could give me their experience. And I knew mine was not going to be exactly the same, but it was just helpful to hear from people. And then I have a local support group. I feel there's a use for both the online and the local. The online is nice because when I was in my isolation, and any time of the day or night, it could be 2 a.m. And if I was waking up with anxiety about this treatment, I'm taking this poisonous stuff, and, I'm anxiety about the treatment, there would be somebody somewhere in the world awake. And so it was really nice to have that online support group. And then my local support group to go, we used to meet in the library once a month. We would go, and just to meet with real live people who were going through the same thing of me was such a help. So
I'm sorry to interrupt. You have a question
go ahead.
and a comment. You've got actually two comments. So the first one was, Teresa is saying, similarly, doctor told me she didn't think it was cancer, but it was so similar, shocking after my biopsy. I was lucky to have church friends bring me food and soup during my iodine therapy. I was blessed. And the other comment is, in my experience, the impact of doctors minimizing the impact was the hardest aspect of mental health with thyroid cancer. I'm 45 years out and the memories are still traumatic.
Wow. Wow. Isn't that something? 45 years out and still remembering it is traumatic.
There's also a question from Elizabeth asking, can you please tell us the online connection group?
Thyroid cancer website?
If they go to ThyCa.org,
Mhm.
you can click on support groups, and then they have a list that is separated by state. So if you want to find a local support group, you just click on the state and choose the city that's closest to where you live. In the past, we were having all of our meetings in person, but now since the pandemic, so many of them are on Zoom. So you are really not limited to what support groups you can join. So I would definitely recommend that. And you can also let ThyCa know, go to ThyCa.org and sign in on the guest book. And if you want someone to call you, if you want one-on-one support, that's out there. And I was also going to say that a lot of us, including my support group here in Portland, Oregon, have our own Facebook page, but you're welcome to join any of them really worldwide. I mean, if you want to go and join someone else's Facebook group, those are great online support experiences as well.
Yeah, and I think that the reason I had one that was just worldwide, there weren't as many. We didn't have as many of the local ones. So, but it was on the ThyCa website where I found it. So if it's
Abby is reminding us that that there is a group called Inspire, and you can look that up and just go down to the thyroid cancer experience, and there's a lot there as well that you can check out.
good. Okay. So there are many more ways that thyroid cancer can affect our mental health. So the next question, here. So why is this important? Why is it important to look at mental health? Well, it's proven that physical health and mental health are connected. Your physical health affects your mental health. There are symptoms that come. Like I said, I was feeling depressed, and that may not have been from the physical aspects of the thyroid cancer, but definitely it could have been from my low thyroid function at the time. So my physical was affecting my mental health. Mental health and how we're doing affects our physical health. Research has even shown that addressing mental health symptoms can improve the outcome, both how we go through the treatment, our tolerance of it, how we are able to manage it, and then what our outcome is. So it's really powerful, and it's something that you can address yourself. You're a whole person. You're not just a physical person with thyroid cancer. You have all those different components I mentioned before, and physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and mental health. There's a lot that you can do in a preventative means to prevent it from really deteriorating your mental health. It's knowing that it's normal to have a mixture of emotions, that, it's okay that you may feel sad, you may feel angry. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. There's so much you can do on your own to address it. And then, of course, there are trained professionals. And I do want to just mention quickly, how to know when it's time to see a trained professional. I am all about self-care and, taking care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and every other facet of a human being on your own, doing what you can to be proactive about that. But there is a time, you know, like I mentioned, those emotions are there for a reason. The shock kind of slows us down and gives us a chance to get a grip on it and take in the information. The fear also gives us a step back. The anger sort of motivates us. When you get into that anger phase of being angry that you have this, it kind of motivates you to do something, to be proactive, to take care of yourself in the ways that you can. And then over time, by honoring those emotions, not going, oh, I have to be happy, you know, I have to be strong and I have to be happy, but going ahead and expressing those emotions and honoring them when you have them, over time, then the hope and the confidence comes because you've honored your own feelings and your own process in going through this. The confidence comes and the gratefulness. I'm finding that the time is going and I have a lot more I want to say. So I'm going to go a little quickly through some of this. But the key that's really important on this slide is that when emotions become overwhelming, when it just becomes so intense and overwhelming that the irritability, excessive worrying, feeling, isolating oneself, not being connected to friends and family, changes in sleep patterns, eating patterns, concentration, motivation, not being able to live your everyday life, and most of all, thoughts of suicide. Those are times that it's important to get professional help. Psychiatrists, psychologists, marriage and family therapists, there's so many different disciplines now, professional counselors, licensed clinical social workers. And then it's important to note that some of the mental health symptoms overlap with side effects of treatment or side effects of thyroid problems in general. So it's important to always communicate with your doctor about any change. The changes are really important. What's not normal for you? Like I said, for me, it was not normal to have to be depressed. So for me, that was a change. So that's a really important, thing there. I wanted to talk a little bit more. Let me see what time it is. Oh, we're getting close. I want to leave some time at the end for questions. So I'm going to just run through this quickly. We've talked about connection and how important that is. We did talk about the support groups. There are support groups. The ThyCa website does have, lists of those support groups. Like we mentioned, this conference is a way to connect with others. Faith groups, some people have. Therapy groups, which are different than support groups in that there's a therapist there to facilitate a deeper conversation about it. I have at my office, for example, I have a therapist that is trained in dealing with individuals and families going through chronic illness or treatment, that kind of thing. Even the therapist that doesn't have special training in that can be helpful. Just neighborhood get-togethers. Sometimes it's important to have interaction and connection with people that is not regarding thyroid cancer. You don't want that to be just the only thing you think about all the time. So doing everyday life things. Sometimes we think, oh, I can't go out and just have fun. I'm dealing with this trauma. But you need that balance that a couple of people talked about earlier. Connecting with yourself through journaling, art, music, drawing your feelings, baking, and exploring yourself and your connections. I'm going to give you an exercise. This is why I'm kind of rushing through because I wanted to get to this one. My plan was to have you, if you have a pen and paper, you can do this while we're going through it. maybe even if you just write down some of the categories, if you don't have a chance to actually fill this out for yourself, this is a way of when you don't even have others present, if you're just sitting by yourself, you can address your emotional health. I'm going to show you a picture first of this is a finished product. I'm showing this to you not so you can read every it doesn't have to be like mine. You don't have to write down the same things as me, but I'm showing you so you can see you don't have to be an artist. This is a simple project where you don't have to be good at art to do it. So what you would do in this particular project is you would start with this baseline here, the foundation. We're going to be building a house, and you want balance in your house. You want to build a strong house that can withstand difficulties, traumas. So your foundation, under the line, you would write down what grounds you. What is your foundation? For some people, it might be, the values in their life. What directs your life? Is it family, faith, loyalty, acceptance, friendship? What are the basic foundations of your life? Now, if you feel like you want to think about this a lot deeper later, maybe just write down the category, and then you can either write or draw in your foundation later. If you draw a line on the side of the building, the sides of the building, that's your structure, your support. Who are the people, things, I want to say animals, because my dog, she's actually asleep on the floor next to me. She, for some reason, loves to be in here if I'm on the computer. So who are those people and other things that form your structure and your support? Who's your support system? The roof. What is your protection? When do you feel safe? It could be, where do you feel safe? Who do you feel safe with? What helps you feel safe? And you can draw or write in some of those things that help you feel safe. And then I like this one, the chimney. How do you blow off steam when you're feeling stressed? What do you do? Are you a runner? Are you, my dog and I do an agility class that gives me a chance to work off some of that energy. So how do you blow off steam? That's one of my favorite ones. Let's see, what else? Oh, the doors. Whoops. The doors. This can be, where do you close the doors? What do you keep hidden from others? Even though you may not want to share those things, if you're working on this project by yourself, you may want to just check in with those things. What do you keep hidden from others? Are there important emotions you keep hidden? It's good to just acknowledge them even for yourself when you keep the doors shut. And then the attic, those thoughts up in the attic. What are some of the thoughts that run around up there? Like, oh no, what about this? That's where all the worrying comes in. And sometimes it can help to just put those all down on paper. I know that when you bring things out in the open, they're less scary. So I like to write them down. It could also be helpful thoughts. What are some helpful thoughts? You can challenge your thoughts. If you have some that are kind of negative going on up in your attic, you can challenge those thoughts and write down some others. And then the windows, what brings light or a breath of fresh air to you? Those are things that can be really healthy for you. And then our fences, what are some healthy boundaries that we set? Like I mentioned earlier, there may be some people that just catastrophize and you just can't spend as much time around them. You may love them, but need to set some boundaries. What are some boundaries? And then this one's really kind of important. What are you proud of? What can you put a sign up and say, I'm proud of myself. I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing this exercise. sometimes these things seem silly, when we're going to draw pictures, but it can be very powerful. And I'm proud of myself for going ahead and doing this. Now, I don't know that we have time to talk too much about it. We'll see how many questions we have, but also questions, or if you'd like to share what it was like for you to do this exercise, what was difficult, how you could use this later, and then what other ways you could use this exercise. One example is, if, let's say, you woke up another way to use this same exercise. This is kind of a basic one to help you just process some of your basic support. But what if you woke up one morning and you were angry, just angry about the whole thyroid cancer journey? There's, so that's the basic house. But then here's one that's based on anger. How to look at the door. How do I hide my anger from others? List things I do when I'm angry. How do I feel when I'm angry? How do I behave when I'm angry? And what are some ways I can manage my anger? There's a lot of other details here. So you could make a whole house around anger. You could make a whole house around loneliness, sadness. So there are many ways. So I'm wondering what ways you think you could use this. And then questions. I did put one resource here because I came across this resource that I had never seen before. I was not looking for it. I was looking for some other information, doing some research for this project, and I came across this resource. It's a fund for cancer-related behavioral health. So people who maybe can't afford behavioral health treatment while they're going through cancer. And I thought that was really a neat resource to have. So I shared that one with you. What other questions or comments about how it was to do that exercise or think about some of those things?
There is a comment from someone saying doctors who treat this cancer need to be educated about how to break the news and what the impact is on people. I was told during my post-op period in the recovery room, I was alone and terrified. Really a bad way to deliver this type of news.
Yeah. Good point.
Absolutely. One thing that I can share when I went through my thyroid cancer journey is, at first, I really dwelled on it and found myself to be really overwhelmed with fear because I didn't know very much. My surgeon suggested that I stop searching the internet with sites that were not credible and to stick to the credible sites like ThyCa or the Mayo Clinic or some of the great cancer hospitals like Sloan Kettering. And he made me promise I would not be going into the hinterlands of internet, internet sites that just really were not healthy to be, and certainly not correct. So that was number one. And number two, that was really important to me, is after talking cancer for quite a while with all my relatives and my friends, I decided I wanted to not be the woman in the room with cancer. I just wanted to get on with my everyday life. And that was the best thing that happened to me, because for 8 hours a day when I was working, I wasn't thinking about it. And that was very, very therapeutic.
Yes, staying as much as possible, staying in your normal routine, or when you can, returning to your normal routine, or, developing a new routine. And that's why we really encourage these self-care habits, like I have a self-care sheet that I often give to people that is about, like I mentioned, nurturing physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. And it kind of takes you through looking at those areas. Okay, what am I doing? This isn't even about cancer. It's just, what am I doing for myself spiritually? What am I doing for myself emotionally? And those things, like spiritually, for example, can mean different things to different people. It's not, we think of religion when we say spiritual, but for some people it's not. their relationship with themselves at a really deep level, or their relationship with nature. For other people, it is their faith, and I look at physical, mental, emotional, spiritual like a table with 4 legs. And if you are doing something every day, or, as much as possible, to nurture all 4 of those areas, then when something goes down in one, like let's say you have a physical ailment, or, you get a cancer, or even COVID or something, that one leg goes down, you can still stand on 3 legs. But if you have not been nurturing all of those, you don't have as much of a foundation to stand on. So that's another example of that. And just your everyday routines, incorporating self-care into them.
We've got another question saying, I'm exhausted researching about my options and reading studies. I don't know how to stop. I try and tell myself this is all new, diagnosed in late July, and it's okay, but I'm mentally exhausting myself. I think I'm just trying to cope, and it's presenting as learning as much as I can about the illness. I'm not fearing cancer as much as the post-surgical existence. Maybe you can address that.
Mhm, mhm. And so I'm just thinking, though, there's lots of things that can be helpful. One thing is balance, like you're saying, you're having a hard time stopping that. So what you're doing is you're addressing the mental part. So there's the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and many others, but let's just go with those 4. Your brain is going. You're researching. If sometimes it's hard to stop something, because, for example, if you were on a diet and you said, I'm not going to eat cheeseburgers, no cheeseburgers, all you can do is see it as cheeseburger in your mind. Where if you say, I think I'm going to make a healthy salad, I wonder what I could put in that salad today, that's what you'll see in your mind. So it's replacing it with something else rather than trying to get yourself to stop doing the research. Putting some focus on the other aspects of your life, the physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever you have. It may be, focusing on something you want to add to your life rather than trying to stop one thing, adding something else. And then also that could be, you'll have to decide for you, but that could be an example of when it becomes so overwhelming, that the distress about it becomes so overwhelming. Maybe that is time to seek some professional help, whether it is a therapist that you meet with one-on-one, or since there's so much focus on the thyroid cancer, I'd say maybe a different type of group, like even a grief group. I know we think of grief groups being for when we've lost someone to death, but for example, we have a grief group at our office that is on all kinds of grief and loss. So there's the loss of what your everyday life was before this. There's the fears and the grief and the fear about what life is going to be after the surgery, after the treatment. So, a different type of therapy group. I guess, that's one where you need to kind of decide for yourself, is it becoming all consuming, overwhelming? Is it interfering with your ability to go about your everyday life? That's when I recommend professional help.
How do you feel about making gratitude journals or gratitude lists to refocus?
I find that really helpful. And there's an awesome YouTube video. It's a TED Talk, actually, I think it's called The Gratitude Project. And you'd have to watch it to get the full story because I'll tell it all wrong. But in general, it's about a lady who was very depressed and had some other things going on. And I don't know whether it was a friend or who told her to find something she's grateful for each day. Well, she's a photographer, so she decided she would take a picture every day of something she was grateful for. And when you watch the TED Talk, she shows all the pictures, and it's just amazing the things that she found. Because if you can imagine every day trying to find something to take a picture of, after a while, you'd think you might kind of run out. But she was finding the most amazing things to be grateful for. And it totally turned around her life. It actually turned around her life. She was on the verge of divorce, turned around her marriage, everything. I know that I haven't been doing it lately, but I sometimes recommend a gratitude journal that I have done myself in the past, where you write down 3 things you're grateful for. And then when I get busy, I put a reminder on my phone that comes up in the morning that says gratefulness, 3 things you're grateful for, and try to just even think of 3 things I'm grateful for. I've seen it to be helpful. I'm glad you brought that one up because that's it.
Definitely, it helped me. How do you feel about meditation for relaxation?
There's so many different types. I think that, so the parts in our brain that, the emotional centers of our brain that in a brain scan can show really lit up when we're in distress, really are calmed by meditation and relaxation. And nowadays there's so much available, even without, for different people like different things. Like I love gentle yoga or restorative yoga, but during the pandemic, I was going to a gentle yoga class, I think it was before the pandemic, and then all of that shut down and they started doing everything virtually. Now for me, so a lot of people have found that, they can get apps or go online and do yoga or meditation or relaxation. I find that I need the in-person class to do it. That's just me. You kind of have to play with it and see what works for you. But then there are other things where an app can help me, like the gratitude. Whoops, I think I just closed my.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have about 4 minutes or 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to ask another question, this would be a really good time to do it.
Okay, I wanted to just, I just clicked on the chat because I was, not looking at it because it can be too much to do both things at once, but I wanted to just glance at it because I really appreciate you guys giving, some comments on what your thoughts and feelings were as we went through our time today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of those fears of secondary cancer. Yeah. Grieve the loss of your thyroid. That is a really good point. I'll tell you, I still am grieving the loss of my thyroid. You notice things that are different. There are so many things that are different. And I know some of them may not be scientifically proven or medically, like I am convinced that I cannot lose weight without my thyroid. I don't know. I try so hard, and things that worked before do not now. But yeah, the loss of thyroid, just the loss of being able to not have ever had a cancer diagnosis. I mean, once you've had a cancer diagnosis, I feel it affects me anyway, kind of puts my life in a different category.
I prefer to try and put a positive spin on it if I can, and call it a health opportunity, so that I can think about ways I can try and make myself as healthy as possible from this point on, to avoid future experiences.
So that's awesome. So someone commented, I recommend the seminar on Friday about risk of secondary cancer. It was mentally reassuring about the low risk. Oh.
ThyCa seminar, risks of secondary cancers, demo radioactive iodine treatment. I think that's the one she was talking about.
Okay. And so that was like reassuring to her. That's
Yes,
good.
yes, definitely.
So this one, this isn't, I changed it up a little for this presentation. So it's not, but I can write that out with what I send to ThyCa.
Okay. Yeah, if
I
you
mean-
email that to them, they will share that with
Okay.
everyone, and we'll
Okay.
share it in our support groups. So that's great. That's very
I just
helpful.
changed it up to make it apply. And then there was the anger one too.
Okay.
Because it can really be used for in a lot of different ways. So you don't have to use the categories we used, but it was a, you know, felt it was a way to apply it.
Absolutely.
You know, there's so much more. I think we did a good job of at least connecting on some of the really important parts.
Absolutely. And he is telling us that we are out of
Done.
time. So I really want to thank you. I wish we had 2 hours with you because you've got all kinds of great information. So thank you so much for being with us. And I hope everyone has enjoyed the conference. In the meantime, thanks again so much. And we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.